guys, welcome back to my channel. So last week I put a question box on Instagram about all things dieting, bulking, cutting, reverse dieting related, and so we're going to go through them and answer all your questions. Okay, so first one was, do you have to drop calories and increase expenditure within a 10-week deficit? So I'm basically going to run you through. So when you're in a calorie deficit, obviously your calories will start at a certain level, your energy expenditure will start at a certain level. Now, this energy expenditure obviously is going to be your activity, it's going to be things like your steps, it's also going to be things like your digestion, so your body burns calories digesting food. It's also going to be things like your BMR, so that is your basal metabolic rate, which is essentially the calories that your body burns at rest, which is a much larger number than people think it is. So all these things, that's going to be your total output, and then obviously this is going to be your input. Now, over time, through a process called metabolic adaptation, your body will adapt. So your body's primary goal essentially is to maintain weight. Your body does not want you to be in a deficit, because essentially, if you're in a deficit for forever, you will starve, and your body does not obviously want that. So what your body will do is will slow down your body's processes. So it'll slow down your metabolism. It will become more effective during workouts, so it won't burn as many calories. Obviously, you're not eating as much food, so you're going to be digesting less, which means you're not going to be burning as many calories. Also, obviously, as your weight drops, you are not going to need as much energy as when you were, at necessarily like a bit of a heavier weight. So all these things mean that your output is now going to decrease. Now, there's no kind of like rule to how quickly you plateau. What I would say as a female is take your measurements, take your body weight daily, so you can create an average across the week. And if for 3 weeks your average has not changed, then that probably means that your progress has plateaued a little bit. So then you have to change something. Now, within a 10-week phase, I would suggest that you do make changes in order to see the best progress that you can, and in order to make the most of that phase. So once you do get to a point where you plateau, so your average hasn't changed for 3 weeks, what can you then do? So you basically have two options. Now, you can either kind of utilize both a little bit, or you can do one or the other and then obviously see how it goes. So there's two things that you can do. You can increase your energy expenditure, which could be maybe doing more steps, it could be maybe increasing your cardio sessions, or you could decrease your calories. Now, what I wouldn't do is do a sudden increase or decrease to both. I wouldn't suddenly jump steps, jump cardio and drop calories, because it's going to be quite a kind of shock on your body. What I would do instead is look at, okay, where can I add more steps in? Can I add another cardio session? So for example, when my progress started to plateau, the first thing that I did was increase my steps. So I increased my step by about 1,000 per day, and I also added 5 minutes onto every cardio session. Obviously, that increased my energy expenditure. Once that then kind of got to a level where, again, it was starting to plateau, because it will, I then dropped my calories. So I kind of did a little bit of both at each time in order to maintain that deficit throughout my deficit, until obviously I'd reached the end of my dieting phase. And obviously that's when I started my reverse, which I am documenting on YouTube also. So yes, you do need to make a change, but what change you make is going to depend on how your body responds. There is no kind of like right or wrong way to create a deficit, if that makes sense. There's no kind of like, okay, at week 3 you need to do this, at week 4 you need to do this. It will be purely kind of how your body responds. And the biggest thing I can say with this one as well is be patient. You should expect that your weight is going to fluctuate every single day. And you should expect that 1 or 2 weeks, your weight and maybe your average weight isn't actually going to change that much. This does not necessarily suddenly mean that you're not doing something right. It may just mean that you need to be more patient, especially as females. Obviously, we go through different phases within our menstrual cycles, and that will impact our scale weight as well. So for example, during my dieting phase, this was how things looked roughly week to week. So as you can see, like, yes, there's little kind of like changes, but nothing really drastic happened week to week. But when I looked at then the bigger picture, which was 3 months, obviously that's where you can see the biggest change. So again, it's really, really important to recognize that you're not going to suddenly be losing loads and loads of weight really, really quickly. Initially, you may see quite big drops, but that is going to be kind of water retention. It's going to be water weight. It's not going to be body fat. You need to give your body time to actually adapt, recognize that it's in a deficit, and then kind of let it do what it needs to do. And then when you need to push forward, then you can then do so. So how do you reverse diet? So I am covering this one in my own kind of reverse dieting series, which I am doing over on Instagram, and I'm going to do a full YouTube video on it as well once I have finished. I'm documenting kind of each week. But essentially, when you reverse diet, we basically have to reverse that metabolic adaptation. So a lot of people think that when they kind of get to their desired goal within a deficit, that then they have to keep doing those exact same things in order to kind of maintain that. So if their calories are really low, their energy expenditure really high, they're then like, well, how do I now manage this? So a lot of people, when they get to that low weight, they then kind of go, okay, well, I'm done now. And then they go back to kind of eating normal foods, eating normal, amounts of calories, and maybe not doing as much energy expenditure. So then people obviously gain weight, and then they're like, well, I don't know how to do this. How can I live my life and maintain results? So this is where reverse dieting is so important. And you have to treat your reverse diet with the same dedication and commitment that you gave your deficit if you want to see sustainable results. So obviously, as I said, we go through all this metabolic adaptation, your processes slow down, your digestion slows down, you're not burning as many calories because you're not digesting as much, your body becomes more effective in workouts, etc., etc. What we need to then do is reverse that. So we basically need to speed up your metabolism. We need to make your body become more effective at burning calories during workouts. We need to eat more food, have more calories burned during digestion, and basically raise your BMR and just raise those maintenance calories. So we do that through, firstly, slowly increasing your calories. Now, depending on what deficit you are in, will obviously dictate how much you initially jump your calories by. But after that initial jump, I would then recommend increasing by 50 to 100 kind of every single week. Again, this is going to depend on your progress. If you jump by 100 and you're still losing body fat, obviously you're still in deficit. I would also then kind of not just suddenly drop everything, but slowly decrease things. So for example, my cardio was 3 sessions per week. That is now dropped to 1 to 2 sessions. My steps were 14,000. They are now dropped to 12,000. Obviously, I'm only in week 2, so these things will still be changing. But yeah, that is how I'm initially doing it. And then what I will do is obviously monitor my progress week on week, be jumping by 50 to 100 calories per week. And then I will slowly bring my steps down, slowly bring my cardio down. But full transparency, my sessions are going to be more functional, so I am going to be kind of getting in more cardio that way, and I do want to kind of be running more and stuff as well. So my cardio is going to be different, but I'm still going to be doing some form of cardio. But the biggest thing I can say with this is a big reason that I talk about kind of lifestyle changes when it comes to dieting is because, yes, dieting is a phase, but if you want to maintain that, you need to continue to do some of the things that you were doing. So not to the same extent, but a lot of the kind of issues are that people will kind of go ham on workouts, they'll go ham on steps and ham on cardio, and then they'll basically just go from that to doing nothing, and that's where the problem lies. So that's why, especially within my coaching and within myself, we focus so much on your daily habits, because things like your steps, your weekly workouts, maybe, the movement that you do each day, the habits that you have each day in terms of everything, they are all going to be the things that not only help you get those results, but also maintain them. And that's not to say you have to do them to the same level, but if you suddenly, let's say you go from doing 12,000 steps and then you suddenly drop down to 6, of course that is going to be a massive chunk of energy expenditure that you're now no longer doing. So you would have to then drop your calories even lower in order to maintain those results. So you do have to keep doing what you're doing to a certain extent, but not to the same level, essentially. So this is why things like daily steps are so important, because they are one of the easiest ways to maintain your results, because they're free, you can do them from anywhere, and they don't really require a lot of recovery, and you can do them at any time as well. So yeah, don't just stop doing the things that you were doing. You can slowly obviously decrease them while slowly increasing your calories until you get to a good maintenance level, but you also have to continue to do something. So you have to continue to do some form of steps, some form of movement, which obviously that is where kind of lifestyle change comes in. So question 3 is, what is metabolic adaptation, which I've kind of covered already, but essentially, like I said, your body does not want you to be in a deficit. So it basically is going to adapt. So your energy output is your BMR, so that's your basal metabolic rate, which is your calories burned at rest. So even if you did not move all day, you did not move at all, your body would still burn a certain number of calories, and this number is probably higher than you think it is, in order to keep you alive. So, things like your heart beating, things like your brain working, breathing, all these things burn energy. So your body will burn a certain amount of energy every single day, regardless of what activity you do, and that is your BMR. We then also have to account for your TEF, which is your thermic effect of feeding. So this is essentially calories burned during digestion. We then have your EAT, which is exercise activity thermogenesis. So this is like the movement that you do every single day. So things like moving my hands now, things like, you know, going to the toilet, walking up, walking back. Not so much kind of planned steps, but just general movement that you do day to day. That is going to be your exercise activity thermogenesis. Then we have your NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That is basically planned exercise. So anything like your workouts, maybe planned steps, maybe like a long walk, things like that as well. That is obviously your NEAT. So all of those things, so your BMR, your TEF, your NEAT and your EAT, all then are your energy output. So that is your TDEE. So that is your total daily energy expenditure. That is the amount of energy that you're expending every single day. You then obviously have your calorie input, which is literally just the food that you put in, you know, into your mouth. It's the energy you put into your body. Obviously, when, like I said, when you are in a calorie deficit, your body will basically reduce that TDE in order to get you to kind of, you know, maintain weight. So metabolic adaptation then is essentially the process in which we reverse that. So we slowly obviously increase your calories, so your body's burning more energy during digestion. You're also going to have more energy, so you probably are going to be moving more. You're probably going to be doing things like fidgeting more, like moving your hands more. You're going to be speeding up your metabolism, and yeah, just essentially reversing that process so that you can obviously maintain results at a higher level of calories. Number 4, how long should a cutting phase be? Now, when it comes to dieting, a lot of people will kind of think, I've been in a diet for years. I've been dieting for years. I can't see results. The biggest thing with this is that people see dieting as a long-term thing, and it's really, really not. Regardless of how much weight you have to lose, dieting should still be a phase. And what I mean by this is not only is a phase going to help you be more committed, but a phase is also going to give you that much more motivation. If you are going, right, I'm going to do workouts, I'm going to do more steps, I'm going to drop my calories, maybe I'm not going to drink as much, maybe I'm not going to go out for food as much, but you have no end date to that, that is never going to give you motivation. And realistically, within a couple of weeks, you're probably going to be like, oh, I'm sick of this. Whereas if you can go, okay, this phase is 10 to 12 weeks, you are going to be so much more likely to make those small sacrifices and kind of commit to it that little bit more, which means that you're going to get results quicker, and then you can obviously come out of it a lot quicker as well. So there's 2 ways to look at it essentially. The first one, I would always recommend at least 8 weeks. So 8 to 10 or 12 weeks, I think is a really, really good level, because it's long enough that you can see good progress, you can make some good changes, but it's not too long that you're going to lose motivation and have the most horrible time. If you know that you are someone who needs to manage more social occasions, you do have more social things on, maybe you're not going to be able to kind of be, you know, as committed as you would like, maybe you've got a holiday, maybe you've got some work trips, things like that, you could make it a slightly longer phase, so more kind of 12 to 16 weeks to account for those days where, you know, maybe you're not going to be able to kind of stay on track as you would have planned. But again, you don't want to make it too long that you then kind of aren't as committed. So with this one, I would personally recommend anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks. Now, this is not to say that you're going to get the complete results that you want within this time, but it is really, really important, not only for adherence and not only for motivation, but also as well to actually give your body a break from dieting, because dieting is a lot, you know, it's a lot for your body. And like we said, if you're constantly dieting, you are going to be kind of lowering that metabolism. And so you need to give your body a break from that. So you could then have, you know, maybe like a 2 to 4 week break where you move to maintenance, and then you could go back into another dieting phase. So, but the biggest thing with this is that your diet, you can only have those breaks, and those breaks will only be effective if you are consistent with your calorie deficit. So if you are someone who is in a 10-week dieting phase, but you are eating out a lot, you're maybe not tracking your calories consistently, maybe you're not hitting your steps consistently, maybe you're not doing workouts consistently, then there is no point in you taking a break, because you do not know what you're actually doing. You do not know what your current expenditure is or what your current input is, because you're not being consistent. So that is a big thing I would say, is within your dieting phases, you have to be consistent, because then you know exactly how your body is responding, and you then know how to push forward. So if you're not seeing progress, but you're not tracking calories every single day, or you're not hitting your workouts all the time, or you're not always getting your steps in, or, you know, you're not always hitting your protein, you do not then know which component to kind of change first. Whereas if you know exactly what your input is, exactly what your output is, you can then make changes and amendments to that in order to then see more progress. So I hope that makes sense. So a lot of the time when people say like, oh, I've been dieting for ages, but I'm not seeing progress, it's because you're not in a deficit. If you're in a deficit, you'll be losing fat. It's as simple as that. A lot of people will overestimate the amount of food that they're eating. When they're not tracking, they'll definitely overestimate the amount of food that they're eating, or they'll kind of go out, you know, maybe have like a meal out on a Saturday and then kind of go, okay, whatever, I'll get back on Monday, overeat them for the sake of it, which then basically takes you out of a deficit for the week. Then obviously they'll probably restrict on Monday then, which means that they're under eating, which then means that they'll get to Friday, they'll be starving, so then they're more likely to overeat again, and you basically just go through this vicious cycle. And I was stuck in this cycle for ages. Like, I for years thought I was in a deficit, but I wasn't. I was under eating in the week and I was overeating on the weekend. It was literally as simple as that. It can sometimes feel really, really difficult. Like, I know it can, but this is why I prefer to kind of keep phases at things like 10 weeks, because you are more likely to make those kind of, you know, smarter choices because you've got that end date in sight. And this is why it's also important to have goals set as well, and not just the end goal of, you know, X amount of weight loss, but have those little goals posts along the way that are going to keep you motivated and going to keep you adherent as well. So yeah, I would say anywhere between 8 to 10 or 12 to 16 weeks. Any longer than that and you will need a dieting break. And if you've been dieting for 12 to 16 weeks and you're not seeing progress, it's because you're not in a deficit. So then you really, really have to be honest with yourself. You know, are you tracking everything? Are you, you know, weighing foods if you need to? Are you hitting those steps? Are you really making that conscious effort? Because you have to make a change in order to see a change. So then coming back to the previous question, what if you then still have body fat to lose? Absolutely fine. You just then go back into a deficit. But again, once you've had that diet break, you've given your metabolism that break, you're going to be able to then go into a deficit on higher calories. If you're consistently trying to kind of, you know, stay in a really, really long deficit, not only is it going to be really hard, but you're going to have to get your calories really, really low and your energy expenditure really high, which isn't going to be sustainable. And then you're probably not going to kind of stay consistent with it. So yeah, have your dieting breaks, and then you can go into as many dieting phases as you want. But what I would also say as well is don't go into them with an intention of, I'm going to lose X amount of weight, because it's pointless. You don't know how your body's going to respond. You don't know how your body is going to look at a certain weight. And this is something I always say to my clients. If they ever say to me, I want to be X weight or I want to lose X weight, we question why that is, because actually the goal is not to lose weight. The goal is to maybe fit into clothes better, maybe be more confident in your own skin, maybe, you know, just feel better in your own skin, maybe have, you know, feel fitter when you're running around with your kids or whatever. Like, that is the goal. And a lot of people think that fat loss is the goal, but no, like, that is the goal, and fat loss could be a tool that is going to get you there, but you don't know how much of that tool you need to get to that point. So even if you think, I'll be happy when I get to this or this or this, just because you've been there before doesn't mean that you're going to look like that or be like that again. You do not know how that looks. You may, you know, diet down to a stone heavier than you thought you wanted to be, and you may be perfectly confident and happy in your own skin, and then you've got the desired result. You haven't hit the target weight that you set, but that wasn't really the target. The target was to be more confident in your own skin. And that's what you've hit. So next question, is protein more important than calories in terms of fat loss? So I think what they kind of mean by this is, you know, if you're having those days where you maybe hit your calories but you haven't hit your protein, should you then go over calories to hit protein, or should you kind of, you know, just leave it? So biggest thing with this, I would say, is we always want to look at consistency. So we don't want to be perfect. Like, we're not going to be perfect. We're human beings. So look at it consistently. Consistently, you want to be hitting your calorie target and your protein target. But if there are certain days in which you have hit your calories but you haven't hit your protein, it's absolutely fine. Like, it's absolutely fine, especially if fat loss is the goal. Like, fat loss does come down to calories in, calories out. Protein is going to help you, you know, keep you fuller for longer. It is more satiating. It is going to help with building muscle, which obviously can then mean that you're burning more calories at rest and all those sorts of things. But if in order to hit your protein target, you're consistently going over your calorie target, you're not then going to be in a deficit, which means you're not going to see that fat loss that you want. So I would always say, if fat loss is the number one goal, calories come first, but you should be closely monitoring your protein as well, and you do want to be hitting that consistently. But with everything, consistency is key. You know, a few days, like 1 or 2 days of not hitting your protein is not going to make a difference, in the same way as 1 or 2 days of not hitting your calories or going over your calories is not going to make a difference. You have to look at things from a bird's eye view. Just because you've missed protein on one day but you've hit calories doesn't then mean that you're going to like suddenly not see progress. So yeah, consistently you want to be hitting both. So 80% of the time you want to be hitting both. But if there is that occasion where you've hit calories but you haven't hit protein, don't worry about it. So when bulking, When and how to increase your calories. So first things first with this one is when bulking, a lot of people will either not increase their calories enough or they'll increase their calories too much. Now, when you are kind of like bulking, the main aim of kind of going into a gaining phase is obviously to gain muscle. So what we essentially want to be doing is obviously we want to be in a calorie surplus. So we want to be eating more calories than we are expending so that we have more fuel to put into workouts so that we can progressively overload, eat, harder. We can overload those muscles. We can build muscle. We've got more energy to do that. And we've also got more kind of energy then to recover. So when and how? So first thing that I would do, it depends where you're coming from. If you are coming from a deficit and then you decide you want to bulk, I would sit at maintenance for a certain period first to allow your body to adapt. And so you can see exactly where you are. You can see exactly how many calories you need to maintain, exactly what your output looks like, and basically just how that looks for you. If you suddenly jump into a bulk and you suddenly increase calories, you're going to gain body fat quite quickly, which is probably going to mean that you then kind of like freak out and pull out of it. So yeah, if you're in a deficit, I would definitely move to maintenance. And once you're at that maintenance phase, then you should know how many calories you need to maintain those results. So you should know that, right, on this amount of calories on average, and this amount of steps, this amount of energy expenditure, this amount of workouts, this amount of intensity, I am roughly, managing a X to Y gain, an X to Y weight. So again, it's going to be like a range. You're not going to be kind of like, okay, you're 70 kg, right, you're holding 70 kg. You're not going to. You're probably going to range from 70 to maybe 72. So we're looking at a range, not a specific number. So you should know, okay, well, at this is the range that I'm holding. So then what you can do is you can jump your calories up. So the first thing that I would do is jump up by kind of like 200. So I would jump up by 200 and then I would also assess my output and look at, okay, is my output a little bit too high? I would always recommend still doing some form of cardio, just because obviously it is good for your cardiovascular health, but the higher that your output is, you are going to obviously need more fuel to, to counteract that. So I would look at potentially, depending on what you're already doing, kind of potentially dropping your cardio sessions down, maybe to like 1 a week if you're doing more than that. Looking at your step count as well. If you've got a really, really high step count, does it need to be that high? Can you drop that down a little bit? Because again, what we don't just want to do is suddenly increase by loads of food, because it's going to be uncomfortable. Your digestion is going to suffer, and I promise you, it's not all it's cracked up to be. So when bulking, you essentially want to increase your calories. So first things first, you could increase your calories by, let's say, 200. After, 2 to 3 weeks, you can then assess how your average weight looks and how you're feeling. Have you jumped up on the scales? So anywhere between kind of like 0.25 to 1 pound per week is okay. Like that is like a good range to be gaining at. Anything more than £1 a week, so that's going to be more than £4 a month, is probably a little bit too quick. So probably a little bit unnecessary. Biggest thing I can stress within a bulk is that you are going to gain body fat, and you have to be okay with this. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because you are going to gain body fat. You cannot be in a surplus and only gain muscle. No matter how kind of hard you're trying with your training, you are going to gain some form of body fat. So that is where I would start. I would start by increasing your calories by 200, assessing where you're at, obviously assessing how your weight is changing. If you are kind of gaining at, a good rate like that, let's say that you're gaining, up to kind of like £1 per week, or 0.25 to £1 per week, you can then look at, okay, can I jump by another 100? Can I jump by another 100? If you're at a point where you're like, I don't want to increase food anymore, maybe you can drop your expenditure down a little bit. If you're still doing lots of cardio, maybe drop that down a little bit. If you're still doing lots of steps, maybe drop that down a little bit. You still want to keep a good level of energy output, because it's good, physically and mentally. And you basically just want to jump your calories up at a good level. That means that you are going to gain, but you're not gaining at a really, really quick rate, which is going to make you uncomfortable and probably make you pull out of it. And you have to think of your digestion as well. So when bulking, don't kind of go in with the intention of, I'm just going to eat whatever I want. You still want your diet to be predominantly whole foods. You still want it to be, 80% whole foods and maybe like 20% kind of like processed foods and things like that. If you suddenly jump to, lots of protein shakes and lots of processed foods and things like that, like your digestion will suffer and it will not be fun for anyone. So next up, how quickly and at what rate should you see results within a dieting phase? Now, this is completely personal, and there are so many factors to consider. So a lot of people will dictate their progress based purely on what the scales are saying. Now, if you are weight training, you have to take into account that you are going to, essentially be potentially building muscle as well. You also have to take into account as a female that we have a menstrual cycle, which has a big impact on our weight. And we have to take into account that you do not know what £2, £3, £4 loss actually looks like. And the way that you look and the way that you feel is more important than anything. So your desired weight may not actually be what you want. And what I mean by this is you don't know how you're going to look at a certain weight or a certain size or a certain shape. And you may not actually need that size, shape or weight to get to your end goal of being more comfortable, being lean, things like that. If you are strength training, you are weight training, your body composition is going to change, which basically means you could be dropping body fat but building muscle, which means that the scales may not actually change that much, but you could look completely different. So as an example of this is how I used to look. So this was me. Obviously, I was a lot younger back then, and this was me a few years ago. Now then, my body weight is exactly the same in both of these photos. But as you can tell, my body composition is completely different. So if I was measuring my progress on my body weight, I wouldn't have actually seen progress. But clearly I have. So it's just really, really important that when you're looking at progress, you are considering all factors. You are looking at, yes, what the scales say, but on average, not once a week. You are looking at your measurements weekly. You are looking at your progress photos weekly, but you're also assessing how you feel, how your clothes are fitting, how your digestion is, how your sleep is, how your mental health is, how your physical health is, because there are so many factors to consider. It's not just about how much weight have you lost, but it's about how do your clothes fit? How comfortable do you feel in your own skin? How confident do you feel in your own skin? How healthy do you feel? How fit do you feel? How are your training sessions progressing? How has your diet changed for, the better? Are you now doing things that you weren't doing before? Are you now showing up for yourself more? Are you now prioritizing your sleep? Are you now prioritizing whole foods more? Are you now prioritizing protein more? There are so many different things and ways to measure progress that are not just the scales. So the scales may be moving at a slower rate than you want, but if you've achieved all of those other things, then to me, that means that you've seen more progress than anything. And ultimately, that is the end goal as well. The end goal is not to lose a certain amount of weight. The end goal is actually to be more confident in your own skin, have your clothes fitting better, be more, outgoing, maybe, not stress in social occasions, not have to worry about what other people are thinking about you, not have to go out for food and, stress about what you're eating, the calories that you're eating, having full food freedom. Like, those are the ultimate goals. Yes, fat loss can be a tool to get to those goals, but it's not always a tool to get to those goals. And sometimes you can achieve those goals without achieving that desired fat loss that you actually want to. And in that case, what a flex. You've already hit your goal before you thought you would. And that is a wrap. If you are still here, thank you so much for watching. I hope it was helpful. And if you do have any questions about anything kind of like fitness, health, lifestyle related, please just pop it in the comments and I'll get back to you in the comments. But thanks for watching and I shall see you in the next video.